Hello, it is Cardiologist again. Today I would like to make a video talking about removal of the front bumper and cleaning of the headlights. You know, sometimes after a while a car's headlights just begin to let the car down. My car has 144,000 miles. It is a little bit more than 8 years old, and what I'm beginning to see is that the front headlights are very cloudy. Today I'd like to talk about how we can address that problem. So sometimes even after you wash the car, you look at it and you say, something just lets it down. As we come over here, take a look at our headlights. These headlights unfortunately are very cloudy, and it's just not letting the car shine the way I think it should. The rest of the car is in remarkably preserved condition. Now, this is a Mercedes W211 E320 diesel, and Mercedes has several quirks, and one of the quirks in the W210 and the W211, as well as a lot of other late models, is that one needs to remove the entire front bumper in order to get at the headlights. So this video is going to essentially be twofold. Number one, how do we remove and then install the front bumper? And number two, how do we deal with the headlights? I think over the years I have purchased and used almost all the different products that one could use to try to deal with headlights. Let's just take a look at what's on my shelf. Yeah, we've tried that. Reasonably decent. Works better on convertible top windows. We've tried this, the Mother's Headlight Restoration Kit. And you know, these kits are decent enough. That's not the only kit in here, but those are the first two that I could get my hands on. To be honest with you, they work reasonably well, but the results are very temporary. I believe that the reason these results are temporary is because there is no protective layer which is then left on the plastic. When you have oxidized plastic, the outer layer of the plastic has actually undergone chemical changes from UV light and just from the oxygen in the atmosphere and whatever other weathering process is going on. Superimposed on that are some scratches. But cleaning these headlights has to begin by removing the oxidized layer, and then what's left underneath is now the raw plastic with nothing to protect it. Furthermore, when you've removed all of that oxidized material, you leave behind scratches. So step number one is to get rid of that outer layer, and then subsequent steps have to take those medium-sized scratches and consistently get them out. You go from medium to fine to super fine, and then you polish. And then when you're all done, once you've got it, you have to seal this thing off with some kind of protective layer. And if you don't do that, you're just going to find that it happens again in very, very short order. These headlight restoration kits either have one type of grit, or maybe they have 2 or 3 grits, but they don't have lots of grits, and when you're all done, they do not provide that protective layer which I believe is going to provide the long-term shine that one wants. So in the infinite wisdom of Mercedes-Benz, you have to actually take off the entire front bumper if you want to get at these headlights and remove them. Now, I suppose it's not completely necessary to remove the front bumper, but I'm a bit concerned about being able to get into the nooks and crannies. I'm also concerned about scratching, and I'm concerned about overspray. So I've elected to just do this job the way I consider to be the right way, and to get this bumper off. And we're going to see that the bumper is held on in numerous locations. We have a screw here, and of course another screw over here. But it gets much more complicated than that, because right underneath the fender flares we're going to have to turn the wheels, get under there, and remove some screws in that direction. So let's see how we do it. To get at the bumper holders, we're going to need to remove the front half of the inner fender flare. As you can see, this is divided into 2 halves. This is the back half, this is the front half. By taking off the appropriate screws, I should be able to work free the front half. Once the front half is off, I'm going to need to do that on the other side of the car. To work on the left side, I turned my wheels all the way to the right. That exposes these nuts a little bit more clearly. We will remove them, and we're going to try to take out the front half of the inner fender flare. First nut right over here. Second nut here on the upper edge. Third nut where the front half overlaps with the back half. Those were all 10mm plastic nuts. Next, we are going to need to use 8mm to get in here. There's one here and there's one behind. Those will need to be removed also. So with these free, I've now turned the wheel to the left, which will expose two more nuts deep back here. They are as follows. Number 1 and number 2. These again are plastic 10mm. They have to be removed, and then we should be able to wiggle free the front half of the inner fender liner. Nope, I found one hidden connector I didn't get. It's in here, and this is one of those push connectors. So I had to turn my wheel back to the right again, and I'm going to get a tool and remove that, and then I'll show it to you. Okay, so this guy was hiding in there. I removed it. Now that I finally removed that, I'm going to again turn the wheels to the left and remove the inner half, the front half of the inner fender well. Alright, well, we got that out. There she is. And so for the front half, just to be clear what you're going to have here, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the plastic 10mm nuts. It will be 2 of the metal 8mm bolts, and it will be one of these guys. Okay, now we're on the right side. Well, I am certainly assuming that everything is going to be symmetrical, but as you know, one should never assume. I can tell you right now, again, I do see this connector. We'll take this out using this tool. I see a nut here. We see a nut here. So it looks pretty symmetrical. I'm going to take it out the same way. I don't think it's rocket science to take out one of these things, so I'm just going to remove it, and then when it's all done, I'll tell you whether I found any differences from the left to the right. Okay, well, this is interesting. First of all, it is symmetric. Second of all, on the right side, I'm seeing a connector that had been missing on the left. So right underneath here, you have to pull this guy out using a tool like this. And apparently that is missing on the left side, and so I'm just telling you about it. In a car that has everything present, they should be here bilaterally. Alright, and so we have now removed the right front inner fender cover. Okay, so having exposed the front fender, we're now going to go underneath the car, and we're going to take out the plastic panel which resides right under here. Let's get that out of the way so that we can see what we need to see. Okay, so 4 8mm bolts later, that panel is down. Let's put this to the side. So we will now benefit from having the car up on the ramps, and I'm going to get underneath. This is going to just give me more room to work, more room to be able to show you what to do. Alright, we may as well get the easy one. 8mm screw right here, and then one on the other side. Okay, we're under the car. I removed the light bulb from here. That is the side marker. You see, we took that out, and I unplugged here This is for the fog light on the right side. On the left side, it's a little bit different. This is the thermometer, the temperature sensor here. This comes in over here to the left fog light, and this is again the side marker bulb that comes here. With all of that disconnected, we can now try to get the upper bumper connector. Okay, so this part could be a little tricky, but I have a lot of light under here. I'm in a way that I hope I can show this to you. There is a screw right here, which is a T25. This screw has to be removed. This holds the upper left fender bumper support in place. When this screw is removed, then we can move the support out of the way and hopefully get this bumper off. Once that screw is off, you come into this bracket with a screwdriver. Come like this, and then this bracket moves to the right. There's a hinge on the other end. When it moves to the right, it's now unhooked. Do the same thing on the other side. Well, those brackets were clearly the hardest. Now that that's done, you have to take off this screw over here and this screw over here. These are 10 millimeters. And finally, laying underneath the front of the car and looking up, there are two 10 millimeter bolts. One here, and as I go to the right, you can see that I, for a moment, had my wrench on the other one, which is right there. We're going to take those two off. And again, I'm laying on my back underneath the car, looking straight up under the front edge of the bumper. Okay. Now all the screws are off. This should pull off. And I want to support it carefully on a cardboard box, making sure I don't scratch anything. Lay down some cloths and make sure that you don't damage any parts. If I've done my job correctly, all screws are out, all connectors are out, all wires are off. If I happen to see any surprises, I'll certainly let you know. Alright, well that came off without too much trouble. Car looks a little funny with its bumper off, but that's alright. Let's turn around. I have the bumper stored here. And I was successful. There were no surprise connectors. Everything came off great. So we'll leave that there. And now let's take a look at the headlights. Sometimes doing a job like this is good because you wind up exposing something that you never even knew was an issue. Here's a case where the pipe going to the intercooler is not hooked up right. So let's get this thing hooked up just right. Could potentially lose boost on that, lose turbo boost. Well, good, that's fixed. This is now fine, so I'm not going to have any leaks from turbo. I wonder if I'll notice any difference. Honestly, the car had been driving fine, but every little bit counts, right? So I'll tell you, this is a good example of you open up an older car and you start seeing things that you never knew were there. So the other thing that I'm noticing pretty quickly is that the front fan is supposed to fit in here, but it's not. And then when I get underneath, I basically confirm that. So when I had reinstalled the front fan, I missed the bottom holders. Well, I don't want the car driving around like that. I'm going to fix it. That's a whole other sub-job unto itself. But I'm going to do that before we continue anything. Okay, well, another sub-job done. You can now see that this is in as it should be. And unfortunately, I guess when I had done this previously, I didn't get it in just right. Well, this time I did. And having taken off the bumper showed me what the problem was. And also this pipe is now back in. So I think that there are actually no more problems. If I find any, I'll let you know. And now it's time to do what we came out to do, and that is to take off the headlights. The headlamp assembly on the Mercedes is big, and it's expensive. You want to get a new one of these, about, I don't know, $250 to $300 per side. It's just plastic. My plastic is all cloudy. We're going to clean that up. Let's take this whole assembly off. We'll start with this screw. I see another screw over here, and there'll be a third screw over here. We'll get all those off. We'll pull out the unit. We'll disconnect it, and then we'll see what's cooking. So with 3 8mm bolts, 2 long ones, 1 short one. The 2 long ones were long, and the short one was back under here. We now see that the unit just pulls straight out. So we'll take it out and disconnect it. Okay, 4 wire connectors, and we have removed the right front headlight assembly. Let's now remove the left front, and then we'll work on fixing them up. Alright guys, there you go. We have the headlight assemblies off the car. Let's take a look at the car. Definitely looks a little bit naked, but a very successful procedure. I'm going to try to button up the car now, get the wires out of the way, get it off the ramps, pull it into the garage, and then I'm going to take my time and refurbish these headlights. Okay, so for the next part of this procedure, I want to give some credit where credit is due. There's a great video on the internet from a guy named Chris Fix. I watched it. I think he did a great job. I am not pretending in any way that I came up with this. I give full credit to Mr. Chris Fix, but I thought that this would still be a useful video to see how it applies to a Mercedes W211. So, I've got some 400 wet and dry, I've got 600 wet and dry, and then I have some assorted wet and dry, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500. And we are going to slowly and carefully wet sand these headlights. You can see how cloudy. You can even hear when I rub across it, it's certainly not smooth. And we're just going to go slowly and get this done. Okay, so we're going to start with some 400 wet or dry. We're going to make sure that this is all nice and wet. We're going to make sure that this is all nice and wet. We're going to go in circular motions, do this a bunch of times, and then when I'm all done, we'll go in side to side motions. After we do 400, we'll do 600. After we do 600, we'll jump to probably 1,000, and then we'll jump to 2,000. I'm going to do it in 4 steps. Okay, this is what it looks like after 400 grit. First, I went in circles. Then, I wiped everything off with a paper towel and water, and we went sideways like this. Did the same thing on here. Of course, it's very cloudy, but the only purpose of that was to get off the majority of the oxidized material and the bigger scratches. Now we're going to go to 600 grit. Okay, we've now done it with 600 grit. Next is going to be 1,000, and then I'm going to do 2,000. Okay, now we've done 1,000. It's time for 2,000. Okay, and this is it after wet sanding with 2,000 grit. I'm going to rub this down with isopropyl rubbing alcohol, let it dry, and then we're going to give it a coat of clear coat paint, just like Mr. Chris Fix suggested in his excellent video. Alright, tape this off to be as reasonably neat as possible, but I'm not terribly worried about overspray because I took the headlights off the car. Okay, this is the product that I'm using. It's Gloss Clear Ultra Cover. Key is fast drying, non-yellowing, UV resistant, and this is going to do what those headlight kits don't do. Once all that top coat is removed, it's going to restore it. We're going to put this on in 3 light coats and then probably wet sand it with the finest grit that I have. Okay, so it's the next morning and these have dried. I put 3 coats of the clear coat on this after going through the sanding process, and now I don't know if you can see or hear, but it's a little rough and I've got an orange peel, so I'm going to wet sand this and then we'll try to buff it up. Alright, so I just wet sanded this with 1000 followed by 2000. You can see that there's a little glaze, which I'll get off, and it's much smoother now. So now what I want to do is clean this off, and then we're going to start to try to get it to shine. Okay, so after wet sanding that with 1000 and 2000 and then drying it, now it's nice and smooth, except it's a little bit hazy again. So what we're going to come in and do is use a little rubbing compound and try to get that nice. After the rubbing compound, we'll use a cleaning wax. Okay, so after a good amount of polishing and buffing with this, we're now looking like this. Certainly better. I think the final stage is going to be to use a little bit of good carnauba wax and see how it comes out. And so, after a coat of wax, this is finally what they look like. They are completely smooth as silk, and they are really nice and shiny. I would say that they look 95% like they're brand new. Regarding those headlight kits, those restoration kits, look, they serve a purpose, I suppose, and I think that they do a decent enough job with very temporary results, but there's absolutely no way you can compare a headlight restoration kit that just has essentially one or maybe two steps with a complete wet sand and lacquer, and then another wet sand, and then a compound, and then a wax. This is a much more professional, labor-intensive process. But if you're willing to put in the time, you can completely restore some headlights. The wax is drying on these, and just to show you, once you come in here with a little microfiber cloth, I mean, look what it comes up to. Very, very nice. So let me finish wiping that off, and then I'll show you both. And there we have it. So I think the key difference between this method and other methods is going to be that lacquer coat. And then when you are finished with that lacquer coat, it still looks a little bit off, and I think it needs to be wet sanded with 1000 and with 2000 grit to really make it nice, followed by a compound, followed by a cleaning wax, and that really progressively takes out the scratches. And now, instead of just being at the bare plastic, which is temporarily shined by something like a headlight restoration kit, which will immediately oxidize, we're now protected by that lacquer because we have 3 coats of lacquer there. So I'm anticipating that not only does this look good, but it's going to last. So we'll let you know. And now, of course, it's time to get these headlights back on the car, but I'm going to take this opportunity before I do that to replace all the bulbs, because this car has 144,000 miles on it. I have replaced my main headlight bulbs, but the other bulbs have never been replaced. Access on these cars, as you can see, is a little bit difficult, and I think you have to take advantage of the fact that they're off the car and you have easy access. Furthermore, I have just saved on a minimum of $500 in purchasing new ones that probably would have been knockoffs anyway. The really good Hella ones, which are original, are extremely expensive. And because I saved all that money with just about $20 worth of supplies from Walmart, plus some wax and compound that I already had at my house, I think I'm going to treat myself to about $60 worth of new bulbs. So there's 4 bulbs in this setup. This is the container, the door. It comes off, and then you pull out this bulb. These bulbs are expensive. These are H7 bulbs. I had previously had the mid-grade, the silver. I decided to bump up towards the Silver Star Ultra. Now, over here, this is the bright bulb, and this will be also an H7. Now, these bulbs are very expensive. They're over $20 a piece, and this bulb is working fine. So what I think I've decided to do, and this bulb is also fine, is keep this bulb in place because I really don't use my brights very much. And then I'm going to take out this bulb, being careful not to touch it, and I'm going to keep it in the car. And then if my bright bulb wears out, I'll just put in one of these because, you know, we have to strike that balance between preventive maintenance and just throwing money at things that don't need to have money thrown at them. There's a very inexpensive bulb here as I take this out, and I decided I would replace that. It's a 2357, and then down here what you do is twist there, and there's a little guy here, and I'll replace this as well. This looks to be a W211 E. So we'll get two of those. You may have heard about or read about a Mercedes wiring problem that occurred in the 90s. It was a problem where in an attempt to be environmentally friendly, they were starting to use plastics that would decay a little bit earlier, except what wound up happening is that, well, the insulation on the wires would fall out and things would short. Now you can see my car, even though it's of a different era, seems to be having that problem. So I want to come in here, and I don't care about the ground wire really, but the hot wire I want to tape up and make sure that we're not going to have short circuits. Alright, so I went in and taped everything up. I didn't really need to tape the ground wire, but I did it anyway because I figured maybe it might somehow run into something that's hot. It shouldn't, but what's the difference? Be as thorough as we can be, take no chances. So again, this problem really was supposed to have been solved. I would hope that it's been solved in the majority of the car. Maybe we're just dealing with a component that was using bad wiring. I don't know, but let us hope that this same process is not occurring throughout the rest of the car. If you own a Mercedes from the mid-1990s, I'm afraid to say that you do need to be aware of this and that you really need to look for it. But this car is a 2006 and the problem should be solved. Okay, so we said we were going to replace the bulbs. We replaced the main bulb here. I replaced this bulb up here. This is the bright one, and I said that I wasn't going to replace it because they're working, they're expensive, it didn't seem like a good use of money. And what I did is I took my old bulbs and I saved them, so when these go, I'll just put them in. But I did think we would take this one out, and I got these. This turns out to be a 2825, which I just ran over and got. And I decided I would not only get two here for the headlights, but I would also replace the side marker in the front of the car, because when the whole car is open and taken apart, it's so little work, and these bulbs are cheap. They're less than $2 a piece, so come on. Anyway, I'm going to do that, and then we're going to reinstall the light bulbs. I mean the headlights. Okay, we got the car back out. It's up on its ramps, and we're going to start to reinstall everything. Okay, so we put them back in, hooked up all the wires, 3 screws, 4 plugs. Very straightforward. You just adjust it so that you have a nice even gap whenever that's possible, and that should do it. Let's put the bumper back on. So the first thing that I do is I just physically put the bumper on. It's not hooked in by anything, it's just holding by its weight. And we're going to come in here, put in the first screw here and the second screw here, and we'll get those hooked on. Okay, now with those upper screws put in, let's go ahead and take the same type of screws, and we're going to put 2 screws in from below. Remember, we get underneath the car, we look straight up, and you're going to see those screws roughly about here and roughly about here looking straight up. Okay, so I have 2 screws from the top and 2 screws from the bottom. Now here's a good example of what you can learn. People love when you make mistakes. Great, I made a nice mistake. Take a look how this doesn't fit right. When you look at why it doesn't fit, it's because this has to slide into this. That means I get to take off all the screws that I just put on, and I get to start again. This time when I put the bumper on, I have to make certain that these guys slide on over their respective holders. Okay, so that was done, and now you can see that it lines up much better. And so now I can go back and put on the screws that I had put on and then taken off again. What fun. Okay, so top and bottom screws are back on. Now we're going to work on the special bracket that holds this area in place. Okay, so I got the brackets and I cleaned them up. First of all, these brackets are not the same. They are chiral, if you will. They're mirror image of one another. And so when I took them off, there was some dirt in them and it was kind of a rough interference fitting. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of garage door lubricant, just a little bit of silicone. It's not going to mess up the plastic. I'm just going to spray it in here. That way when I go to install them, I think I'll have an easier time of things. So if you look carefully at these parts, you'll see a part number, and then you'll see this, LI. LI in German, L-I-C-H-T, Licht is left. And again, a part number, and then R-E in German, Recht, R-E-C-H-T, is right. How do I know that? I do not speak German. I like Google. I figured that out. Of course, L and R are the big clue, but I thought I'd look it up, learn a little German while I'm at it. Okay, so now I have this bracket in place, and we're going to take this T25 screw, and the screw goes in here to hold that bracket in place, and you'll see that it makes a nice line and grips the bumper well. I'll put that screw in and we'll move to the other side. Okay, so next on the right side of the car, I'm going to hook up the fog light, and let's see how that will go. That will go like this. Okay, the fog light's hooked up. And now this is going to be the marker for the side light. And like I said, I'm going to just go ahead right now and get a new bulb for this. I bought a new bulb. These are the same bulbs as I put in before, the 2825s. So cheap to fix, and I don't really want to be constantly under my car. May as well refresh the whole system. Okay, now I'm at the left side. First I'm going to take the temperature sensor, and that goes into this hole. So the car understands the ambient temperature. We're going to hook up the left fog light. And then again, here is the parking side light for the left front, and this is a 2825 bulb that I'm going to pop out and replace. Okay, next we take the left bracket and we're going to put that in. I have a little bit better exposure, so I think I can show this to you. The piece that has the peg through it goes in distal all the way down and hooks in. Keep going, keep pushing there. Now I hooked it in, now I pull it back, and then this piece just snaps in and I put the screw through. Okay, well that was certainly the hardest part. We now have the brackets in place and screwed in, and the only thing left here will be these screws here and here. All the electric lines are put in, all the bulbs are replaced, and then I can start putting plastic panels back on. So while the car is still up in the air, I'm now going to put on this panel underneath, and then with this panel on, I will be able to take the car off the ramp and install the inner fender liners. You may remember that when I took off the inner left fender liner, there seemed to be one less connector than there was on the right side, and I said that I thought I had lost it. Well, it was right here the whole time. I guess it just wasn't connected. So we're going to pull that out, and once I removed it, I can then install it properly on the next one as I reinstall the fender liner. Okay, well, the car's back together now. The only thing that's left are the fender liners. This is going to be a really good time to test the lights. Let's turn on the car and test them. Well, I have to say, that looks pretty nice. And our light over here. I can test the brights. Good. Very good. Now let's test the signals. Good. Test the other signal. Good. So I'd say that we're in pretty good shape. Oh yeah, the fog lights. You know, I never even used the fog lights. I wonder if I can even figure out how I turn on the fog lights. Yeah, you have to pull the switch out. And as you can see, they work. So this is great success. We're going to turn off all the lights. We're going to turn off the car, get it off the ramp, put the fender liners back in place. And so that does it. The car's back together. Fender liners in place. And I think we can say, job well done.